I'm the program manager for prevention here at the Guidance Center. We're a community mental health organization in Southgate, Michigan. And I'd like to welcome Catherine Ames and Ben Pinkelman. Did I say that right?
Nailed it.
Okay, Catherine is the founder of Through the Game and has been working with teenagers for 26 years. She was a three-sport athlete in high school and a collegiate Division I athlete at James Madison University. She moved to Colorado after completing her undergrad degree in human communication and sociology. In Denver, Catherine spent 2 years serving as an AmeriCorps volunteer working with high-risk youth. She discovered her love for teenagers as well as the importance of mental health. Catherine earned her master's degree in counseling psychology from the University of Colorado and then spent subsequent years working with kids all over the Denver area in a counseling and coaching role. Catherine is also the mother of three, a wife of 25 years, a cancer survivor, an ongoing learner, and a champion for mental health. So thank you for being here, Catherine.
Thank you.
And then Ben Pinkelman is a 2016 Rio Olympian who played on the USA Sevens rugby team for 8 years. During that time, he served as team captain for 12 tournaments. His last 3 years with the team, he combined his passion for the game with his passion for people to also act as an assistant coach and lead development coach with the program. He grew up in Colorado, where he played a wide variety of sports before devoting his time to football and rugby at Cherry Creek High School. He continued to play rugby at Colorado State University, where he was selected to the under-20 national team and eventually played for the men's national team while still attending university. Ben has a degree in sociology and serves as a mentor for retired rugby players. Ben is also a member of the Through the Game team, where he shares his personal experiences and assists with community relationships. So welcome, Ben, also. And if you don't mind, before we dive in, can you talk a little bit about Through the Game and what you do there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so glad that you had reached out and we made this connection. We love being able to be in a position of reaching across state lines. And I think that's really cool. So as you said, my name is Catherine Ames and I'm the founder of Through the Game. I'm also a licensed clinical therapist. So my day job is a lot doing one-on-ones with my private practice, and then I do a lot of group work. And I started doing this work probably 8 years ago when I was coaching. I was also in the mental health field at the time, but really saw the gaps and the needs that existed in the sports world and this sports community. And I thought I could do something different here. And so I was given that opportunity, and this all started to really evolve and come together. So my purpose in starting this company is to provide education and outreach and to really approach mental health from a prevention perspective, right? We went through the sports world because it's a culture I'm familiar with and it's an existing culture and it can be so wonderful and sometimes problematic, right? But what I can tell you, mental health exists across the board, right? It's not just athletes, but by choosing this specific these groups really was a good starting point to get in and to work with kids and coaches and parents. So that's kind of what's unique is when you get through the game and you get myself, I'm doing this in real time. I'm working with kids every day, seeing their needs, seeing their problems. And then when I get in the group environment, I'm trying to educate them and empower them so that we don't land in a worse situation, you know? So it really is that preventative model. And like I said, it's about filling the gaps because we know, and I'll get into this after Ben talks a little bit about why he's with Through the Game, but there's still a lot of issues in our country, specifically around mental health and specifically youth mental health. So I feel I really wanted to do my part and to try to better the environment for our kids. But go ahead, Ben, if you want to share a little bit about why you're involved with Through the Game and your, connection to mental health.
Yeah. Well, I think my passion for dealing with mental health and being in a better place started from a performance standpoint, which is probably a little bit different than yours. But I think like you'd be hard pressed now to find an Olympic team or an Olympic athlete that doesn't have sports psychologists and therapists working with their athletes and teams. And it's because they care about the player, but the higher up level, all they care about performance and winning. So it started from that. Like it started with we need these kids and these players to better understand themselves and be better able to handle their emotions and their stress so that they can win on the field. And it just unlocked so much for me, I think, as a player, that when we started doing more sports therapy, which, like I said, started from that performance standpoint, but got into personal mental health and dealing with stress and trauma and anxiety. The next season, I had my best year ever, and we as a team had our best year ever. So I saw the power it had to unlock that. And then I could look back at my U20 career and see how. So I think I was one of the toughest, most resilient people in the world. Nothing was going to stop me, but because I couldn't handle my own stress and anxiety, my body would shut down, and I would literally make myself sick from not dealing with these things. And that came with so much insecurity off the field. And I was eventually able to push through. But then when we took that step to dealing with all these issues as a team, I was able to grow so much as a person. So I grew on the field, but then I could see how much more confident I was as a man, how much more I could progress in all my relationships, how much happier I was as a whole. Um, and so I just think it's so, why would you not start earlier? Like
Mm-hmm.
trying to get these messages out there to as many people as possible of deal with the whole person, make your values on the field something you carry with you every day in life, and face the challenges that come with being a young adult. So as many people as I can get out, and I met up with Catherine and just thought it was such an amazing idea and such an amazing platform to be able to help with that goal.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ben. I'm glad to have you on the call. So I really do agree with what Ben said. We're seeing a real trend towards sports psych and this performance-based psychology, right? It's like, how do we make people better athletes? And it's very outcome driven. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think this is a little different, right? Like our approach is about mental health, but we hopefully end at the same result, which is if you're healthier, you're going to feel better, you're going to do better. I just come about it from a little bit of a different angle as a clinical therapist. But yes, this is trending. And I'm thrilled that the sports psych world is on the rise because those folks are talking about critical things too. Even if their goal is to make you the best rugby player, they're still talking about breath work and anxiety and visualizations and some really good tools.
This is the backbone. This is the backbone. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to start, I always try to start with some statistics and just paint the picture of really what's going on. So the number one diagnosed mental health disorder is anxiety. I would say in my practice, hands down, that is what I would diagnose more often than any other disorder. At the same time, I also like to say and follow that up with it is the most treatable. And that is really important. But we are seeing a lot of things that even work in tandem, anxiety, depression, OCD, ADHD, there's a lot of overlap that we see in these spaces. But these issues are on the rise, and there's no denying that. And state to state, it may vary, but you're hearing a lot more about mental health for a reason. You might say, well, maybe we're talking about it more, but either way, these problems are existing. And there's some other statistics that will, as I go through this, that will really kind of solidify that. 75% of lifetime mental health problems will onset in the mid 20s. To me, that is a very critical statistic because that's why this foundation work is so important. Like Ben said, why wouldn't we start this younger? Why wouldn't we have these conversations in middle school and high school so that we can be healthier in our 20s? 1 in 10 youth are experiencing depression that is impairing their ability to function in school, home, family, social life. That's a lot of depression. The other thing about depression is if kids have a family member with an untreated mental illness, something like depression, they are more at risk. Same with substance abuse. If they have an adult in their life with something that's untreated, they're more likely to have some other mental health issues. If they themselves have an untreated um, addiction or illness, they might also be at risk for another co-occurring disability popping up. Not disability, disorder. So that's something that's really important, right? If we're not getting the help we need, something else might pop up. If our parents and role models aren't getting the help they need, that puts us at risk. So there's a lot of different factors impacting our kids. 1 in 7 college students have expressed suicidal ideation. That's too much, too many. And look, I always say with statistics, how true is it? People always want to question because they're hard to hear, right? And even if it's not 100% true, is if it's half true, to me, that's still just as significant. Now, these are from CDC, Healthy Minds Network, National Institute of Mental Health. So they're solid groups that are getting this information. But again, just consider it. Just think of it if it even is partly true. Another statistic is that in the last 2 decades, youth suicide rates have increased by 62%. Again, it just takes your breath away. So that's why all this work really does matter. Obviously, that's worst case scenario. I know too, the Surgeon General just came out with new statistics on the connection to social media and mental health, asking for warning labels and making the connection with time on social media and how that impacts kids. There's all these things that puts our kids at risk. I can't get through a presentation without ever connecting with technology. I mean, it's wonderful. We're able to do stuff like this, and yet it's very problematic. And so we have to really understand the beast that it is, so that we can help our kids navigate it better. So let me pause there. Ben, did you want to comment at all on any of those statistics?
No, it is too much. I think you nail it. And you always forget how bad it was as a kid too. I feel like I'm only in my 30s now, and I'm like, I understand myself better, and I can't even comprehend how bad I would be at times in early
Yeah.
teens and early 20s.
Absolutely. And like you say, Ben, you're not that far from a lot of these kiddos, and it's still so different.
Yeah.
As a 30-year-old to an 18-year-old to a 15-year-old, it's just like even some of the 20-year-olds I work with, they're going, I can't get over these kids. And they're not
Yeah.
that much older.
Yeah. It's like now I have all these experiences, which isn't even that many, but I just know how to handle so much more. And just
Yeah.
trying to think back to when I didn't know how to do that. It's overwhelming if you don't have some tools.
Well, and just to kind of pick up on that, you were fortunate to learn a lot of these tools through some hard times, but also through your sport, right? Which is why even the name of this company, Through the Game. My big philosophy is you have to come through it. You can't go around it. You can't suppress it. You can't ignore it. You have to tackle things head on to know how to handle them. That's my feeling. And I've seen as my own in my own experiences as an athlete and a coach and a parent, there are so many benefits to sports. And so I think that that is what I want to impress upon a little bit right now, just the opportunity for our kids, number one, to be out, on the ice, in the water, on the field, on the pitch without a phone. They get 2 hours a day where they are learning to problem solve with their hands and their feet and their brain. That's how we used to do it. And so something I talk a lot about is multitasking versus multi-tabbing. And our kids have so many tabs open, and it's too much. Our brains were not meant to handle all this information. And that's where I think we're seeing all this overflow. Multitasking is a great skill. It's running down the field with the ball, anticipating the pass, looking behind you, listening to the coach, talking to your teammates. Those are great skills because they're using your mind and your body and everything, your senses. Whereas up here, when we're tabbing, it's all up here. And then you wonder why kids are overthinking and they get stuck in that cognitive loop and they're feeling anxiety because the body is going, what is happening? What is going on? So I got a little off track there, but the power of sports to give them that opportunity is so important. Learning how to problem solve, learning how to be on a team, learning how to fail, learning how to connect with people that you don't necessarily, maybe you wouldn't be friends with, but you have to still pass them the ball. You have to still cheer them on. That's a great skill. That's something we know as adults you have to learn. So we know that sports offers so much good, and then there can be a downside. And, I think that right now things are so outcome driven. There's so much more pressure on kids with even just the cost of going to university, being in college. I was working with one of my clients today who's in college, and we were saying how these schools are $80,000. I mean, who can afford this? So the parents feel the pinch, the kids feel the pinch. There's that pressure that gets passed down. But then there's this, I got to get a scholarship, that all that I got to play in college or have a scholarship or make the team, be a starter, just way more pressure than there ever was. I think NIL, I have different opinions on that, but it's changed the game a little bit to where now it is a money maker. And when we add money into the equation, it shifts why maybe we do things. Okay, so again, that's just my opinion, Ben. I want you to weigh in on that. But even signing days, huge now. I got a letter in the mail. It was no big deal. And even playing at the next level, your kids really have to know what they're getting into because it's a full-time job. I played Division 1. We were a top 20 team. I don't think I could do this now. These kids don't have a life outside of their sport. And all these college coaches are preaching balance, multi-sport. That's not what's happening. Kids are single sporting at young ages. And what we're seeing is injuries at a young age and burnout and stress and anxiety. So you got the mental health issues, the injury, and then quitting. So many kids are walking away saying, I can't do this. Ben, what do you think about that?
Well, huge topic, but I'll just throw two things out and I'll just say the first one on what sports teaches us is, for me, it's a constant practice of learning to believe in yourself. So, and that's whatever level you're at. It's learning to believe that you can progress and you can become better, and that can so easily be destroyed as well. So I'm a big at meet a kid where he's at. So when I'm coaching, we're just going to pull you up from where you're currently at, and yeah, because that's what it is to me, is a practice of learning to believe in yourself. And that comes from our support system. Coaches and people guiding these kids should be those guardrails to get them to push themselves further. So I just think that's one of the opportunities in sport. And then on the professional sport thing, I mean, it's crazy. You'll hear so many professional athletes say, if you don't love the sport, you will never make it. And that's because it's almost a guarantee that once you're 2 years into being a professional, you will hate it. So one of the big questions we get asked when I go to an Olympic seminar, and we've had a lot of Olympic athletes there, one of my favorite questions I ever heard that's been getting asked more and more is, when did you fall in love with your sport for the second time? Because every athlete has the story of how they started to hate what they do. So yeah, just that progress and learning to fall back in love with the game is such a big part of it. And that money does change why. When it is a job, you have to find a whole way of reframing your mind and not having it be what it used to be about. Because it used to just be about brotherhood, love, or sisterhood. And then it becomes about all these other things and just how you make a paycheck. Changes the whole scope.
Right. And even that money trickles down into like scholarship or like we said, NIL, even if you're not at the pro level, that pressure. Did you get a full ride? Did you get any money? And then are you you know, I don't know. It's just, it's so overwhelming for kids. I work with a lot of juniors right now who are trying, you know, hoping to commit. And look, I love it. I want more kids to stay in sports because I think it is so wonderful, but we have to have balance. I'll give you an example. Lately I do a lot of like coach training, and the last coach workshop I did, I was sitting in a room with a few coaches and we talked about something as simple as the water break. Now you're thinking, of course they're getting a water break. You'd be surprised how quick a lot of coaches are hustle back, go, go, go. And that's not good. It's not healthy. And so I suggested, and this is like a tiny little micro step of how we can help our kids. Teach them the pause, teach them to just take a minute, reset, have time to connect, then they can come back on the field. And it sounds so simple, but yet so many people don't do it, you know, because even coaches fall prey to that hustle, hustle, go, go. We have to be better. Even at the high school level, at the club level, you know, and it's hurting our kids because they don't know the power of like and the importance of rest and recovery.
At the international level, we have every water break starts with three breaths, three breaths with each other at the same pace, same tempo, and then get into your debrief, get into what you need to get into. We actually just had a coaching change on the sevens team, and this new coach has come in and just he's won Olympic medals. And our last staff had never won a medal, and he just came in, and the first thing feedback he gave us was, as a staff, you guys are so stressed out. You're rushing everything. You're rushing the athletes. You're trying to make everything go fast. When what is the real point of that? Like, you staff needs to take a breath so that the athletes can take a breath. So that's, yeah, 100%.
Well, I love that example. And it's just also like as adults, to your point, what are we modeling? And for parents on the call, what are we modeling? I was just on a call with a kiddo that I work with who is a retired soccer player. And she doesn't do well at listening to her body. In fact, she said to me, I have a really high pain tolerance. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that you've been taught to push through and to suck it up? And look, I believe in pushing kids and pushing us our limits. I'm not saying we have to baby them and coddle them. That is never my philosophy, but we have to give kids ownership and teach them their bodies and their limits. And now this kid is 20 years old trying to like get an eating disorder under wrap, you know, figure out her eating disorder. She's pushing her body to limits. She ends up in the urgent care. She's away at school because she's pushing, 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 and not recognizing, whoa, I need to take a break, because she has all these agenda items that she wants to do. So her eating disorder is not just about the food, it's the exercise and the obsession with being fit and exercising and filling that gap that she has missed, you know, from being not playing soccer anymore. But it's learning how to find that balance. So these are critical and important skills that we have to teach. One of the biggest things I say, or the most common things I say, is more is not always better. We can't, I don't believe in that go, go, go grind mentality. And this comes from like, I'm a very hardworking, I have multiple jobs, you know, I'm a hardworking woman, but I still take breaks. I still go for walks. I still dial into my body and my needs. And we have to teach our kids that, because right now it's on overdrive. And that's where we're seeing the mental health issues.
Yeah, one thing I got subconsciously right growing up was just very hard work and very hard rest. I was very good at intense rest, which is what saved me a lot of my career. And then I didn't learn to listen to my body and eventually broke my back because I pushed through 3 years of injuries because I didn't know how to listen. But so I wish I learned that earlier, but I still was able to make it far enough by knowing that when I needed to rest, I'm going to fully shut down and rest. So I was fortunate for that.
I love that. And I mean, that's what this girl was saying. This woman, young woman, was saying, she doesn't know. Like I was telling you, she says, she's got this high pain tolerance. And I said, look, you need to do this preventatively. Put it in your schedule where you take breaks, regardless if you think you need it or not, you do need it. And slowly you will start to be more in tuned with your body of what your body needs. But I mean, I meet with some seventh graders who are going 7 days a week, in middle school with one sport. And this is a true story. This young woman was doing that, and then by the year after, torn ACL. Eighth grader. This is so young to start seeing these issues, but that overuse and overdrive, it's going to have a short life. Like the end is going to come sooner than you want. That push and drive, you're not going to get to that finish line faster. In fact, you're going to be crawling there if you make it.
Yeah, 100%.
So, what I want to talk now a little bit about is just stress and how that is different today. Um, our kids, I am never in the philosophy of, all stress is bad. Some stress is really good. I talked to 300 kids the other day at Creek, Ben,
Nice.
and on the way there, I'm a little nervous, and that's good. That's good stress. I always say, push yourself a little bit, do things that make you nervous, step out of that comfort zone. So not all stress is bad. And stress is this big buzzword right now, and so we don't want to teach them to just collapse and not be able to handle the pressure, but we have to understand that how to handle the stress and where the stress is coming from. So there is a lot of this comparison culture that we're seeing again because of social media. It's constantly in their face. Who's doing what? Who's committing? Who's dating who? Who's got a new car? Who's got new sneakers? I mean, you name it, it is out there. Um, and that's, again, the brain wasn't meant to absorb all this information. It really wasn't. So there is this saturation that the kids are hitting and this overload. I think a lot of it, like we said, is the pressure, I think there's a lot of benchmarks and data right now of like standards, even grades. I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, and many of you on the call might be able to relate to this, I didn't know my grade in a class until I got the report card. Or I would go up and look at the teacher's grade book and have to do the math. Now they're getting it constantly. Like they could be sitting in history class and the math quiz pops up on their watch. Oh, you failed. What do you think that does to their system? Or the parent actually will reach out to a kid. I've sat in a room with a kid before who said, my mom will know my grade before I do. And that is just, again, too much information, constant buzzing, the constant notifications. It definitely is stressful and creates a stress response. So what is important though to understand is that everybody deals with stress differently and it looks different. So sometimes your angry kid, it may just be a lot of stress. Your lazy kid, that could also be overload with stress, complacency, even those overachieving kids. There's these kids that are like, I mean, look at some of the losses in the media of some of these high profile athletes who have died by suicide. You think on paper they had it all. How could what, everybody's going, how, why? it doesn't mean they weren't, really struggling. And like there's a quote, just because I carry it well doesn't mean it's heavy, And so I think we really have to understand that stress does look different for each kid, each person. I think that what our kids are facing, it has really changed the wiring of their brain and how resilient they are and their ability to handle stress. Doesn't mean we can't teach it, but it means we need to teach it. So two of the big things that I think are extremely problematic are people pleasing and perfectionism. So I'll sit in a room with kids. How many of you would say you're perfectionists? Almost all of them raise their hand. um again, wanting to be the best, not be a disappointment, be high achieving. I had a kid tell me the other day who's going through ACL recovery. Well, if I can't do my sport, I better be really good in the classroom. So again, a lot of pressure on these standards, but this perfectionism is a game you never win. That is something I would preach. You're just going to keep going, keep going, keep going. And that is exhausting. That is taxing. And same with the people pleasing. The reason why this is problematic is it's unpredictable. You might one day, the coach gives you the nod and you're like, yes. And now you're like, ooh, I need that tomorrow. But tomorrow, coach is in a bad mood and has nothing to do with you. And now you're looking for that assurance and you didn't get it. And now what happens? So as soon as the kids start relying on that external validation and they just live in that people pleasing world, they've lost sight of themselves. Now they don't know what feels good to them. So again, this perfectionism is about standards. People pleasing is about this external reward and validation. We have to teach them to come back into themselves. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the kids who don't know how to take breaks and lean into that rest and recovery because they don't know. They don't know how they even feel. So those are two big, I would say, red flags. If your kiddos fall into that category of people pleasing and perfectionism, let's get a handle on it. We have to stop that. And it's problematic for relationships too, just to be quite blunt. If you have a kiddo that doesn't know how to say no or is afraid to speak their mind, that can be troublesome in a friendship, in a relationship, at work. Now there could be terrible things that come from that, right? So we want to really get out of that way of thinking. Any comments, Ben?
All I really got is just my old coach's favorite saying, which is get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I just think it kind of feeds into all that because when you go into those uncomfortable situations, how do you find yourself not reacting in a people pleasing way, not in a perfectionist way, but just be comfortable and react how you react and be in touch with yourself. And I was in that role when I first was named captain. I hated public speaking. I hated talking in front of the group. I literally almost cried my first time having to talk in front of the whole team. But just I was able to settle into it. So just sometimes a little bit of time to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and that patience from our support network. And I think what you said about how stress looks different on every person is so important. And just being that strong support system as adults in these kids' lives to recognize that so many of these different reactions are probably stress based, and to always approach that with empathy and create space for kids to go through that and then find how they can get comfortable in these uncomfortable situations.
Exactly. And just acknowledging it. Like, gosh, kiddo, it looks like you're really having a tough day. How can I help? What can I do? What do you need? What do you need from me? And maybe they just need space. Maybe they actually need a hug. Maybe they need a good meal. Maybe they need to be hydrated. Maybe they need to sleep, have a good night's sleep. There's a whole list of solutions, but we want to get them out of that way of thinking because, like I said, that perfectionism, for some kids, the reason why that's a hard one to change is because they believe that's what makes them excellent. Well, if I didn't put that pressure on myself, I wouldn't be a straight A student. And I never want to dumb it down for a kid. I never want to say, hey, lower your goals. No, but if there is no perfect, right? Perfectionism means that like I have no room for error, no room for bad days, no room for a B, no room to fail. And that's not healthy because it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And it has to happen. Not only is it going to happen, it has to happen. That's where we learn. And we have to teach our kids that. But again, I think some of this is due to technology because everything's fixed. Everything's prettied up. Everything's edited. Everything is taken exactly the way we want it. That's where a lot of that perfectionism gets reinforced.
Yeah, I
Is
can't even imagine how amplified it is now. Like it's through the roof, especially with sports and highlight reels and all these kids being so afraid to get embarrassed. Like I'm in charge of the development team now, and
yeah,
so many kids are scared to be put in one-on-one situations, and if they get embarrassed in that one situation, it's crushing. It's
yeah,
demoralizing. And then you try to play from that perfectionist standpoint, and I had this in my own playing career. If you're trying to be a perfectionist, it's crippling and it
yeah.
slows you down. If you're free, like you were talking about with the A's, if I'm free, I can be me, but better. If I'm perfectionist, I just get crippled and slowed down.
Totally. I love that you use the word embarrassed. That is a yellow flag. When I talk to kids and I see that they're worried about embarrassment, I'm like, we gotta work on that. We have to not worry about what other people think and that judgment and feel okay with, looking stupid or doing something. I tripped the other day. I was walking to do a workshop and I was coming down the stairs in this big high school and they had these thick mats and I'm passing a kid and I totally trip and I'm like, I just laughed. I'm like, we have to be able to laugh at ourselves and it's okay, to have these mistakes. But if they're so hooked on perfectionism, it's added pressure. It's internal added pressure that they don't need because there's already that pressure out there. And same with that people pleasing. If I think one way to remedy this is when a kid is like, Mom, did you see that? Dad, what do you think? Or coach, turn it back on them. What did you think? How do you feel? Let them feel empowered and give them the voice. And we can teach them that at home. What did you think? This is what I thought. This is what I saw, but I would love to hear how you felt. Give them that platform to actually speak and have an opinion, not just click a button, like, heart, whatever. Not in this vacuum of thinking. We have to get them back to like knowing themselves, rooting down into their values and doing it because it felt good to them. I again, those are two big things I want you to really pay attention to. Now, when we see the big heavy signs of stress and saturation. So when I talk about saturation, think of it like a sponge. Your body is like a sponge and you're absorbing data and information all day. And most of the time it is full. By the end of the day, we're full. Maybe by the end of the first hour of being awake, it could be full. And so preventatively, we got to wring out that sponge, right? Free it up, free the space. But when our kids are saturated, nothing else is coming at them. They might come home and you're like, "Are you listening to me?" They don't even have the ability maybe to listen to you because they're so saturated and so stressed. So some of the physiological and emotional signs of stress and saturation, number one, depression and anxiety. If you start seeing signs where you're like something's out of the ordinary. Sadness is fine. All emotions are okay. But if they're prolonged and if it feels heavier than normal, and you got to know your kid and hopefully they know themselves, but depression, anxiety, again, feeling anxious, fine. Anxiety is different. That is a very much in the body, in the system, and it keeps happening. So depression, anxiety, anger, irritability, restlessness, sometimes, and you might be thinking all teens are angry and irritable. Again, think outside of the norm, right? Something that's a little left to center and you're going, that's not their norm. Feeling overwhelmed, unmotivated, unfocused. Again, remember I said earlier, stress can look lazy. Stress can look unmotivated. That might not be that they don't care. It might be that they don't have the ability right now to take anything else in. A big one is sleep, trouble sleeping. Our kids do not get enough rest and good sleep. Again, if they're on the screen as much as they are, the brain really needs that time to recover. And that's why sleep is so important. So if we can take out distractions in the room at night and teach them to like let the brain really relax, that's really important for them, because sleep is the culprit of so many things. Racing thoughts, constant worry. Again, go back to what I said earlier about multitasking versus multi-tabbing. If they're all up here, that is overwhelming, right? And so many kids talk to me about that. Catherine, the negative thoughts, I can't get out of my head. They get in my way. That's when they're experiencing too much stress, too much, they're full. Problem with memory, concentration, again, bad decision making and burnout. So all of these things are important for us as parents to keep an eye on what's happening with my kiddo and what are the signs I'm seeing. And I would also empower them. Put this list up, talk to your kids. This doesn't have to be us versus them, you, the expert, them, the novice. No, they have a voice. They can be a part of this conversation. They need to be a part of this conversation. So I think it's great to be like at the dinner table. Something I do with kids is I have them rate their stress 0 to 5. Where are you at? 5, high stress, 0, none. Just hold up a number. That's something you could do at dinner. How was your day? 0 to 5. 5, it was awesome. 0, it was terrible. These are just little tools that help engage our kids without just putting the focus on language. And I'm going to tell you why that's frustrating in a minute, but let me pause and open it up to my colleague and see if he has any comments.
Well, I have no comments as a parent because that's obviously not the life I live currently, but I can just talk about how important it is for parents because of my experience in high school. Because I mean, I love my mom and I think she's one of the best moms in the world. She's the sweetest person. But when I was going through high school and my first years of college, I was getting high every night, was blacking out on the weekends. I was cutting myself at times. But I was pretty good at hiding it. But there was probably signs. I mean, I don't know what it looked like, but just it was kind of like, why weren't you paying attention? And then when I have a breakdown at 27 years old, because I'm a retired athlete, and I call her and say, where were you? It breaks her. Like it was a very hard conversation for her because she thought she was there. But in my mind, she was never there. And I was dealing with all this stuff on my own while she was dealing with my 3 younger siblings. So I just think the importance of paying attention and trying things that might seem silly or might seem dumb, like the 1 through 5, but it's giving your kid a avenue to express and forcing them into that situation that they of course want to avoid. They're probably shelled up if they're in a situation like I was, but an avenue to break out of it is very important. So yeah, just the importance as a parent to look for these things and stay super involved. Yeah, it means a lot.
Ben, thank
Catherine,
you. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
sorry. I would just add for parents, these things can start when your kids are 2 years old and 3 years old, and they start to build these into their patterns of behavior and their knowledge base so that they're not all of a sudden at 12, excuse me, or 13 years old and playing sports, and the parents are like, oh, yeah, I heard to try this and to try that. They've already been learning these things, and the kiddos are more in tune with their emotions and more in tune with their bodies and all those kinds of things. And I loved what you'd said about turning it back to them. Like, how do you feel you did? How do you feel about what happened? And doing that, you can do that easily with a 3-year-old, and make it something that they are paying more attention to as they get older.
Absolutely. Thank you for chiming in on that. It can start at any age, and it's what we model. And Ben, I just want to like acknowledge your vulnerability and thank you for doing that and sharing what you did. because it's hard, parents, some of them with all the best intentions still miss stuff. So number one, I just want to point that out. You might be doing the best you can and you might still miss it. And that it's not just on you, right? And that's why I think we have to build the village. It's not just mom and son, dad and daughter. We have to build the village and have layers of support. But also, to your point, Ben, offer different ways, different times, go for walks. A lot of the kids I work with, they love to walk and talk, not just boys, but boys especially do love it because we know the research is boys don't do good like this. They're much better side by side. So, movement, I remember when my son was little, who also has had some mental health struggles. Um, the way I could get him to communicate was if he was moving, throwing a ball, kicking a ball, just on the go. I knew he was listening. If he had to sit there and listen, forget it. He had to be multitasking to really absorb it. So again, know your kid and ask them. Another thought, so you can do the numbers, that's one little handy thing. Some families have like a notebook that they leave out. And so if you're cruising through the kitchen and you just need to write down, oh my gosh, I had the worst day, shut it. And then it gives you a chance to express how you feel without maybe having that other person present for opinions and conversation and suggestions. You just need to put it out there, but maybe you do want others to know. It can be sort of I know a lot of couples do this, right? Where they have sort of their notebook, and families too. Like that's another option. So I think we can be creative here, but we have to open the door so kids don't feel like they're so alone and isolated and locked up, you know. So I think that's very, very critical. Um, Ben, you had mentioned too, your coach said be comfortable with what was it?
Get
With
comfortable
being
being
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you said that because I think one of the issues we're seeing today, I know, is the inability to sit in our pain, in our stress, in our loneliness. We want a quick fix. We want to get to the next tab. That's again what's happening with technology is this quick movement versus slow it down, see it for what it is. Now, I'm not saying get stuck there. That's when it becomes a problem. But we also can't run right by it and ignore it or just shove it down, right? So I think giving kids practice where they have to learn, hey, it's okay. That doesn't feel great, does it? I know today's game was tough. That's okay though. That's part of learning, right? That's how we grow and how we communicate as parents in working through those hard times is what helps them build their resilience and how we model. What do we do when we have a bad day? Do we come home and say, "Oh, give me a drink"? What are we modeling? Or if the parent is obsessed with their weight, what are we modeling? And it's hard. I mean, but I think that's really important is teaching them there's going to be some hard days. I left a meeting yesterday feeling frustrated and sad. And I just allowed myself to feel it. I shared it with my family and I just didn't fight it. And then today I did a little like voice memo for myself on my phone, just acknowledging what I was going through and it helped me release it. And what I realized is, you know what? Today I'm a little better. I still feel a little frustrated, but not as frustrated as yesterday. But that's because I allowed myself to feel the feeling. So really, really critical to teach them to sit in it a little bit, work through it, come through it. Another big thing that we're seeing is this, truncated language and groupthink. Again, a lot of this goes toward social media, and just technology, but teaching them how to actually speak and have conversations, very important. A kid I was working with last night was actually taking handwritten notes. We were doing a telehealth, and it was like beautiful. And I said to her, because she goes, "Oh, you type so fast." And I was like, "I have to because I'm a really slow writer." And she's like, "Well, writing actually helps me learn it." And I'm like, "You're exactly accurate. That is 100% true." So teaching them these language skills of using their voice. And that's where sports comes in, right? Ben said when he was captain, he was nervous as heck that first time he had to speak, but he did it. You know, he practiced and he got better. And he even acknowledged, I wanted to cry. That's okay. All of it is okay. But he practiced and he got better. And we have to teach them how to use their voice. Again, a very, very important skill. So as a parent, make sure when you open the door for dialogue, don't cut them off. Don't interrupt. Let them speak. Let them process. Yesterday in my meeting, the reason I was so frustrated is I was getting cut off a lot. And it just made me retreat and made me want to shut down. And that's what happens with our kids. If you cut them off, then they're like, my voice doesn't matter. So language is very important, getting them to know who they are. What are your values? You don't have to run with the group and like everything they're doing. Know what matters to you and honor that. Um, any other comments on that, you guys?
I would just say that that all shapes how your internal dialogue goes too. So it's your dialogue with your parents is probably going to shape how you talk to yourself. So if you're getting cut off, you're probably not even going to explore your own thoughts. You're not going to know where you're going. You're just going to be stuck. If you're being, if someone's trying to motivate you the whole time, you're probably just going to try to motivate yourself. And that could be that spiral of not listening to yourself. So being the model of that dialogue is going to reflect how they talk to themselves. So just something to keep in mind when talking to your kids.
Absolutely. And so we already kind of touched on this, but amplification and emotional suppression. If our kids are suppressing and pushing down and keep grinding, push through it, and just burying things, what we do know is that it just grows. If you've had an experience and you don't want to deal with it and you just shove it down, it will surface at some point. That's often when people call me, and we're in therapy now and we're working through those traumas and those hard times because at the time or whenever it happened, they couldn't deal with it. They didn't know how to deal with it. But if we don't deal with it, it will get worse. So it again is important to just allow our kids to like feel what they're feeling. Something I say all the time too is every emotion is 100% okay. 100% of emotions are valid. Not 100% of behaviors are valid. There's a difference there. And so we need to acknowledge it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel lonely. All of that is fine. But what you do with it, that may be good, it may not be. It may be okay, it may not be. So we have to really think there and tease those out. So then we get into if we bury things and we don't deal with stuff in real time, that's where we start to see that negative spiral where things really start to get stuck and locked up here. And that's where kids, like I said, get stuck and it gets in their way. So I describe it like a wheel spinning, like a bike wheel. The problem is usually the things that are on that loop aren't positive. And so it's not only is it looping, it's like hurling insults and dirt and mud and pain. I just keep picturing like the bike tire, going through mud. And it's like, that is not good for us. Talk about added stress. Life already has the stress. And now we're our double enemy right up here, right? Now it's extra because we've got this loop going on. So I work a lot with kids on how do we break that negative cycle. First of all, we understand it and see it for what it is. What's happening? What are you saying? When do these thoughts occur? I'm not saying as parents, you don't have to do all this with your child and get into the weeds of therapy with them, but I want you to understand where some of that negative thinking comes from. A lot of times it is when they're saturated, when they're full, when they're stressed, when their tank's empty, and they pull in that doubt, right? They start absorbing and they start making assumptions and then personalizing it. Okay. Those are two big things that I see a lot of kids doing. And in sports as well. They assume something and then they personalize. So, again, a lot of these things we're talking about, you might see in the sports arena and in life. That's what Ben had said right in the beginning, right? They go hand in hand. But to understand that negative thought, a lot of it, like I said, starts with being saturated. How do we release? What are you doing to take care of yourself? And then how do we recognize what's happening? And then we want to challenge some of those thoughts. Sometimes we get stuck in the loop because of that external validation, that need for, well, coach didn't look at me and didn't comment on my goal. Whoop, I'm no good. I suck at lacrosse. I shouldn't be out there. Right. So they kind of work together and it becomes habitual, muscle memory. We just start going into that loop. Black and white thinking also is something that keeps kids stuck. We call that splitting or dichotomous thinking, all or none, good or bad. So the kiddo I mentioned earlier, we're working through some eating issues and body issues and exercise, right? She's the one that loves to work out. And when I said to her, can you take it down a little? Like, she's like, well, I did yoga, but I know what yoga means to her. It's like power yoga, right? She's in there lifting weights. It's not my yoga. So, but when I said, can you dial it back? Her mind went to none. Well, I can't, I rely on this. Like, this is what helps me. Working out is where I feel good. I didn't say stop. I said, dial it back maybe one day a week, you know, build in some breaks, give yourself time to rest. But she heard it as black and white. And when you hear your kids say something that feels very black and white, we want to call them out on it. Most things in life are not black and white. Most. There are shades of gray. There are degrees. And we got to get our kids out of that black and white thinking. Going back to those rates of suicide, that's why. Because some of them feel, oh, it's a bad day, I'm out. No, you don't go from 0 to 100. There's 1 to 99 in between there. And we need to start teaching them. There are degrees, there are shades. And so that, again, is one of those red flags. The black and white thinking keeps them stuck. External validation keeps them stuck. Comparison culture keeps them stuck. Don't worry about what so-and-so is doing. And why does this matter as parents on the call? Because we sometimes contribute to that problem. Oh, did you see so-and-so? We start talking about other kids and people that it's not that you can't have conversation, but are you adding to how they may feel in comparison to others, right? So just keep that in mind, because those are some of the things that keep kids stuck. Like I said, it starts when they're overstressed, oversaturated, overworked, not resting. And then that's when that negativity loop starts to spiral. Now, it can shift and change. This isn't like, oh, once you're like that, it's a forever thing, but it takes work. If you've been doing this for years, that negative self-talk, it's hard to undo, but it is doable. Comments, questions?
Happy.
Okay.
Catherine.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of ask for parents, how do you help your kid find that balance between perfectionism and doing your best and then some? Like you were talking before, you don't want to just do this much. You want to always try to be doing more and getting better and better, but you also don't want them going to the extreme. So how do you help them learn the difference, I guess?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it is about knowing themselves. And each kid is different and unique. Some kids can go and run 5 miles and some cannot. And so it goes back to the uniqueness of your children and what are their goals and their values and their dreams, and get back into their body of knowing those limits. But it's a balance, and I think that it's about talking to them, encouraging them to know what feels right for them. And then keep that conversation going. Are you feeling okay with this? Do you think this is too much? What do you think about playing in this league? Because I know parents really struggle with this because then they feel their kids missing out. They are also in this rat race of, I got to do more. I got to have private lessons. Kids now, not only are they working out 7 days a week, they have private lessons, they have speed coaches, they have so much. And I will tell you what most kids say is they feel they don't have any time to just slow down. Um, and that's where, like, I'm telling a lot of coaches when they show up to practice, give them a little transition time to just decompress, model that. That's why we talk about the water breaks. So I think it's a tough, there's not a real clear path to answer that. Like, if this, then that. I think it's unique to each kiddo. I think each family has to decide what do they value, where do they want to spend their time and money. And if your kids' goals are to be at the top, let's get them there in a healthy way, and not be injured and not be burnt out. And if it's, look, you gain a lot in the journey. And I think we have to remember that. When I was in high school, I remember saying, I'm going to play on the US squad. I was with my best friend. We were at camp and we're in the quad at Dartmouth, and we were like, made this pact with ourselves. Well, that didn't happen. But we both were collegiate athletes, and so great. So I think set the goals, but let's also emphasize the journey and the value in every step we take, instead of being so benchmark driven. I have to have straight A's. I have to go to Stanford. Let's get back into the process. I mean, something I say all the time, let's focus on effort over outcome. The process over the end game. Those are mantras that you can put up in your kitchen, put them in your house, speak about it, model that to your kids. That's how we diminish the perfectionism and diminish that people pleasing. They have to do what's right for them and enjoy the ride and be a part of that. Ben, I see you shaking your head a lot. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to do it as a parent again, but as the coach, it's always framing the mindset. Everything you just said. It's okay with failure as long as there's full effort. So we control what we can control.
Yeah.
We are okay with failure and we're optimistic towards the next rep.
Yeah.
So creating that self-dialogue that is not fully defeated by anything
Mm-hmm.
and is excited to try again. Mental strength, I think, is the ability to not lose belief in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So creating that really strong foundation by never, as a parent, I would guess, never feeling defeated or making them feel defeated by any moment, and shifting the mindset towards, well, it'll be fun to try next time.
Mm-hmm.
Next time there's this opportunity, shaping it in positive lights,
Right.
in that way. And there was one more thing you just said that I forgot I was going to say.
Well, you just
Oh,
made me. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
you said you and your friend made a pact and you guys were going to try to go to the US team. I just think that's funny because I never had the goal of making the US team in high school.
Mm.
My friend would tell me it was possible, but I didn't really believe it maybe, but also I just didn't care that much. Like I think that, like I said, one of my super strengths that made me able to make it was I was able to rest really well. I
Mm.
also think I never got too caught up in it. I enjoyed the challenge that was in front of me, and I
Yeah.
never got sucked into where am I going to be in 5 years when I was 17 years old. I'm a kid enjoying playing a game. And that was a
Right.
superpower to me because I never got so defeated by not getting to these goals that I've laid out that were too heavy too quickly. So just staying one foot in front of the other, I think. And yeah, just keep moving and keep being optimistic about what could happen next.
Totally. And that was like, we said that, but it's not like we were out like hitting wall ball and doing crazy stuff. It was like, it was so different back then. The pressure was different. But I think even when your kiddo comes home from school or from a practice or a game or a meet and they didn't do as well as they wanted, a lot of times that's hinged on the benchmark and the goal, that number of like, I didn't meet my time, or we didn't win the game, or I didn't score as many goals. Try to help them focus on things with like less tangible returns. Ask them what did feel good. Tell me a couple good things that happened or things that you learned today. Were you a good teammate? What was the sideline like? What was the cheering section like? Get them to get out of their own way and start thinking broader. And again, if they can do that in the sport, that is going to help in life. Open the lens, see it multi-dimensional. It's not we won or we win or we lose. It's so much bigger than that. So I think that is really, really critical. Another thing, and I know we're kind of heading toward the end here, but get your kids to be as specific as possible when they're talking about emotions. So we call this, emotion labeling. The identification of emotion is really, really critical. So they know how to handle it. In other words, they come home and say, I've had a bad day. What does that mean? Tell me, give me more. Did your stomach hurt? Did your head hurt? Start asking them questions so they understand what bad is. What does that bad day feel like? What does it look like? Because if we just lump it into one category, I don't really know what to do with this. They don't really know what to do with it. And then it just builds, but if you can get them and teach them to language, be specific. Tell me what that means. What does that feel like? A lot of times I'll ask kids that when you feel anxious, where do you feel it? And they're like, I don't know. But then they start to think, actually, I do. I get stomach aches. I feel it in my shoulder. I have a kiddo that gets a tight jaw and she's starting to do these jaw movements. And I drew attention to it in our session to help her understand that's okay. That's what your body is doing. It's absorbing the stress and showing up and telling you, something's off. But teach them to be specific and to label it. By doing that, they have more power, more control. And most of the time, when we feel out of sync, out of alignment, it's because we feel powerless and we feel we have no control. Everything sucks. I can't do anything about this. And that's not true, right? We want to get them out of that way of thinking.
That was one of the biggest things we did is we would get asked, where do you feel it in your body? And then let that move through your body and like staying in touch with that feeling. And that was one of the most powerful things we did.
I love it. Get back into your body. Like, love and respect your body. Know what your body's going through, don't just beat it up. And we want them to honor it, in so many different spaces. So I think that emotion labeling, getting into their body, reframing, helping them reframe things like, can we look at this a different way? Here are some great reframing questions. Like, what are you actually reacting to? What is upsetting you? Is this fact or opinion? Asking them, do you really have the proof? Because I talked to a kid about this the other day. She shared with me all the negative thoughts that are in her head. And we went through them, and it was like so many of them were rooted in doubt and not necessarily true, but yet they were hurting her. It was extra baggage that she was carrying. How important will this feel to you in 6 months or even next week? Actually, 6 months is a long time for a teenager or a kid. Like I said earlier, I was more upset yesterday than I was today. Time does heal. Time does help us. But offering these questions, let's see. Are you underestimating your ability to cope with this? Like, is this something you can work through? Are you looking through a negative filter? Is there another way to look at this? Are you making assumptions? are you focusing more on the negative? These are great ways to like reframe it. So for example, a kid says, this was one of the girls said yesterday, um, I don't have any friends. And we reframed that because she has told me she has a best friend and she does have other people. But I said, let's reframe that. You have a selective group of friends, right? So in her mind, I'm alone. I don't have anybody. That's not necessarily true. So you work on reframing it. Can we look at that a different way? I don't know how to do this skill. Maybe you haven't mastered it yet. That little word yet is so powerful. Adding that to a sentence, having your kids, again, opens the mind to possibility, to growth, to change. Um, Ben, did you want to say something?
No, no, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. Trying to pick up on the cues here.
No,
Okay, so I guess in summary, one of the things I think that is critical for our children is help them develop their emotional intelligence, their EQ. They could be the smartest kid in the world. If they have no emotional intelligence and no self-awareness, it's not going to get them very far. These are critical skills. Understanding themselves, understanding others. Okay. As parents, ask more questions. Instead of telling them, ask, let them come up with the answer, let them solution it out, and encourage them to be specific. Don't just let them give you these little truncated answers, like I said, that their brains are used to doing right now, these quick little whatever. No, tell me what that means. um Model self-care. What are you doing to model that for your children? Yesterday in between my meeting, I literally sat on the couch and watched a stupid TV show for a half hour in the middle of the day because I was like, I need a break. I know I had two more clients that I wanted to be my best self for. I just needed to really like unplug. And I did, and I felt so much better. And the next session, it was amazing. So what are we modeling? Are we modeling our health and fitness and hydration and sleep and self-care, self-awareness? Leave that door open too. They're not always going to be ready to communicate with you in your time. As soon as they come home from school and you're like, they're not ready. They're saturated. They need to decompress. My kid, when I used to pick her up from school, she did not want to talk on the way home. Just because I wanted to didn't mean she was ready. But when did she open up? Dinner, food, other stuff happening, not this focus. It was just more casual and we weren't pressing her. So be aware, just leave that door open. Validate their experiences. I feel so many teenagers just really don't feel heard. As much as you think they're all blabbing about how they feel on social media, I don't know if they really feel heard because it is so quick and it's not true. It's not true connection, as we know, right? It's this false sense of friendship. I have thousands of followers. What does that mean? So help validate them a little. God, that sucks. Man, that's a hard day. I'm so sorry. Sometimes just leave it there. Um, and then sometimes maybe help them solution a little. We don't want to get stuck in life is terrible. We also need to figure out, what are we going to do about it? But maybe not in that moment. Maybe let them feel it. Give them a day, give them a week, you time it out. But then we have to also move forward. And like I said with Ben earlier with his mom, we have to build the village because you could be the best parent in the world and still miss things. So we need to make sure there's layers of support that your kid can feel comfortable going to your neighbor, going to your friend, going to their grandparent, their aunt, their teacher, their counselor, whomever, but other people. And then the last thing I would say is get them out off the devices with the family and try to engage in tasks that have no tangible return, just for the joy. That is so good because, like I said, everything feels so numbers driven and heavy, outcome driven. And how do they understand effort over outcome if they don't have a benchmark? But we have to just like go for a walk, go for a hike, go for a swim, whatever it is. There's no tangible return. Oh, I swam 10 laps, just jump in the pool. So I think that's good practice for our kids and for us to model. So I hope that tonight was helpful. I don't know if there's any other questions, comments, before we sign off. Anything else you guys want to ask or say?
I just think it's important for parents to know that they don't have all the answers, and that's okay. And your kids don't always need you to problem solve for them. They just need you to listen. And I think that's something when my kids were young, it took me a while to learn. I always wanted to fix whatever was going on. And I think just being able to put your stuff down, put your phone down, and just be present, even if you feel like you need to fix something, be
Mm-hmm.
quiet and just let them talk or let them sit with you until they're ready to talk is really important.
Yeah, I love that. Let them feel it. Like we said, you have to come through it. And if we rescue and come in and bandage everything up, they don't learn. And that's that whole like helicopter parent mentality we've talked about in the past. Um, but I understand the need, right? Parents are afraid. Parents are scared. It's a different world for us too, but they have to learn. Now you have to have limits, right? I'm not going to let them go do something that's going to put their life in danger, but I'm going to let them fail a test. I'm going to let them be a bench warmer. I'm going to let them, even fall on their bike, whatever it is, as long as they're not dying, they have to learn.
Yes, I agree. And it's not always easy.
No, no, it isn't. It isn't. It isn't. So, I want to thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Ben. Ben, I just love ping-ponging back and forth with you. You and I can talk more later, but I just appreciate the conversation. And I hope this is helpful for people, that they can take some bullets and listen and follow through the game on Instagram. And we're always trying to put information out there for parents, coaches, and kids. Reach out if you have questions. We want to be a resource to people, like I said, across state lines, not just in Colorado. And we do work out of state. So just happy to help move the needle in the right direction in terms of our kids' mental health.
Yeah, I think this was wonderful, and I appreciate both of you so much doing this. And we look forward to the next installment of our little series that we're going to be doing.
Great.
Thank you again, Marika. Anita, did you have anything in closing?
Just just thank you for your time and your expertise. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to the next conversation. But thank you for your time, both of you. We really appreciate it a lot.
You.
Absolutely.
All right.
I
Thank
mirror
you
those
again.
comments. Thank you.
Great.